Hello, hello.
This joint is far too classy for us. But they no longer have the guy in the restroom handing you the towel.
Oh, I missed him. I liked him.
Pandemic ruined everything.
Thanks for coming, everybody. Appreciate it.
I'll be back there after the show, handing out candies.
Back where we belong.
We're the opening act for Robbie Fulks. But Mark Guarino is an act in himself. And thank you again for writing this amazing book. You know, in 2007, the University of Chicago came out with a study describing Chicago as a music city in hiding. Basically saying that, you know, Chicago doesn't do nearly enough to promote what it has here, you know, the musical, cultural contribution to the world. I would say just about everybody, most people would casually know that Chicago's, you know, urban blues is a mainstay of Chicago. Might know that gospel music started here, essentially, two gigantic genres of music. But almost everyone I've ever talked to, when I brought up country music, they go, what? Chicago? Country music? No, never happened. So thank you for writing this book, because that addresses that head on. So I'm wondering, Mark, did you get into was that? Yeah, absolutely. A very much needed book, but was that it in your subconscious when you started researching this 10 years ago?
Yeah, and actually it goes back, I thought about that even 10 years before that. It was really to correct an injustice I felt that was out there. I'd seen how Chicago did a really poor job even in promoting its blues history and the gospel and all the genres you mentioned.
House.
Yeah, house. And to a point, I was watching Muddy Waters' house about to be demolished. I was very upset about that. And the music I was really interested in, and I wrote a lot about, was the music that's in the book. And I was really, I was to ask myself, like, why does no one know about any of this stuff? And not just even in Chicago, but outside Chicago, which I think is almost even more important, because as time goes on, narrative starts setting into concrete, and the history is sort of set by the people who really decide that's what it is. And I thought, well, you know, there's an opportunity here to kind of connect the threads, not just of the time I was living in, but really kind of going back to the early part of the century and showing how, like, somebody like Robbie, who's going to be on next, is really connected to artists going back more than a century ago.
So, you know, Nashville, the studios, the labels, Grand Ole Opry, blah, 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 home of country music. A little radio show from Chicago that had the advantage of being on WLS and reaching, what, a third of the country? Did more than any other media to popularize this music. Tell us about the barn dance.
Well, you know, it was really 1924, and radio had only been around for about a year or two, if you can believe that. And in Chicago, there was this mad rush to produce radios. You had high school kids at Lane Tech cranking out radios to bring them home because there weren't enough to buy. And so kind of like the streaming issue now with all these million shows on Roku, there needed to be content on these shows. And so up to the point, they didn't know what to put, so they put opera, and they put somebody reading children's stories, you know, to kids at nighttime. They didn't really, or reciting poetry. And so one Saturday night, the first month WLS went on the air in 1924, the program manager said, hey, let's get some of these couple fiddlers to come in and play, and they did, and it was the most popular thing that they had for the month, but still popular, and it really, they thought, it grew from there, and it became the show that really established the blueprint of how do you market mass music to audiences across the country. That hadn't been done before to that extent, where there's merchandise, where there's a magazine, where there are road shows, where there are Hollywood movies. All this sort of stuff was established here in Chicago through WLS's massive at the time, marketing machine. And also, it was a show that brought all these Southerners up and gave them new names, gave them backstories, and really used their talents to show, to kind of reinvent this sort of idea of the rural singer or fiddler or vocal group to a wider audience. And they were broadcasting that to rural America, not just to Southern America, but to across the Midwest. And because the music was a rural music at that time, it wasn't a Southern thing, and it became a Southern thing decades later. And so, yeah, that was really kind of the significance of the barn dance.
That having been said, having listened to some of those really, boy, was it hokey.
Yeah, that's right. For modern ears, it is kind of hokey. Yeah, for sure. And but the songs were the songs that had been around for hundreds of years, and so a lot of the people in the barn dance went back to Appalachia to go find, we need more songs. Do you know any songs? And collecting those songs, putting them into songbooks, and kind of like making them much more entertaining and soothing for, at the time, modern ears. But the songs, the songs carried through, and a lot of the songs are sung today, obviously. So it was sort of this it was a carrier for the songs until country music really modernized with the honky-tonk era in the 50s, late 40s, 50s. So it became relevant until about World War II, when Nashville really became the place where the music was going to go to the next level. It wasn't going to happen at WLS because it was run by an agriculture magazine that were like, we like it like this.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting because it was the voice of country music for decades, right? Early on, and people had this idea of what this rural life was like, and it was very happy and very wholesome. And then it died when, as you mentioned, the honky-tonk version of country started to, new generation of artists came in, and the Grand Ole Opry sort of grabbed that, and it became the center of country music. But the thing that your book did, Mark, that really opened my eyes, and you drew that connection to what happened in that country scene in Chicago in the 20s and 30s and 40s to the folk scene in Chicago that sort of grew out of that. And it was a natural extension of it, and I'd never thought of it that way, really. But to me, Win Strachey was like the key figure, because he was singing on the barn dance at one point, wasn't he? And here he is on the ground floor of the folk scene in Chicago.
When he was in his 20s, he was in a group called the Melody Men. Talk about hokey. And on the barn dance, you're right. And so, and a lot of the barn dance performers were rediscovered by the folk people, by the folk revival in the 50s, because they were still around, but no one cared about them whatsoever. No one paid any attention to them, but they were rediscovered during that era too. But Win Strachey, he's sort of the unsung hero of this book. He starts the book, I have a quote from him, that he really described Chicago really well, as this place that is sort of an incubator for the creative impulse and the experimental, the impulse to experiment. But then he appears almost every chapter because he lived a long life, and he lived this life like out of a Mark Twain novel where he had a million different lives. And the Old Town School of Folk Music was his last chapter. And it was really, I think that it was his greatest contribution, not to Chicago, but to the country.
Well, and the Old Town School of Folk Music gets itself an FBI file. God bless the Freedom of Information Act. Took you a year, but the feds had those Reds, those dangerous Reds, up at the Old Town School under observation.
That's right. When I was writing the book, I was learning about Win Strachey's connection to the labor movement, and his best friend was Studs Terkel, who we all know.
He's a Red.
He was a Red, and Studs Terkel famously talked about his FBI file. It was on the internet. He was proud of it. And I thought, well, if he has one, then his circle must have one. And so I sent out requests for all of their FBI files of all these people who started the Old Town School. And about a year later, they started coming in. And what I discovered was that every person involved with the Old Town School was under heavy, heavy surveillance by the U.S. government, and with Win Strachey in particular, and also these. Somebody asked me, was it retracted? The like a lot of the
Those blocks of
the
black.
blocks, the
Yeah.
blacked out,
Redacted, yeah.
redacted. Absolutely not. They read like novels. The agent would go back and he would write up what his interview was. And essentially what they did was they went to different parts of his life to interview his employer. He worked for NBC in Chicago. He was a singer for Fourth Presbyterian Church on Michigan Avenue. And basically they would go and ask, do you realize that he's a communist? And you know what happened after that? All of his jobs went away. He got fired.
It's not funny.
And then they would go to family members, and so this thing lasted for years. He grew very depressed. He was unemployed, and by the time that the Old Town School came around, he was trying to market himself as a classical singer for weddings and special events and that kind of thing.
Is there any indication that they're still monitoring wiggle worms?
That's right. It's very dangerous, and
Yeah.
well,
Beatniks, bebop, and
Get them young.
wiggle worms. Yeah.
Get them young. And,
All these radicals. I love the idea, though, that folk was perceived as this, enemy of the state, and I think because of the content of the music, but also who it represented. It represented the underclass, the disadvantaged, the people whose voices weren't being heard by mainstream society.
And also, like, there was a racial component to it. One of the founders of the Old Town School was a homemaker in New York named Dawn Greening. And their house became sort of, I think of her as like a music superfan today, the people I see at shows all the time who would have living room shows or backyard shows. She was that person in the 50s. And she opened her house to all these musicians. And so all these musicians would come through: Odetta, Ramblin' Jack Elliott, Peggy Seeger. They stayed in her home in Oak Park Avenue, Oak Park on Lombard Avenue. And a lot of the performers were black. And the neighbors complained, and the FBI agent showed up and were asking why were so many black people coming in and out of your house? What are you doing here? And they would always deny that they were communists, and the FBI would leave them with some literature, and they would come back months later and do the same thing. So they were harassed for years, simply for having musicians stay at their home. I mean, I would harass someone for having musicians staying in my home for many reasons, but not they're kind of messy and eat all your food. But other than that,
Well, we know about Maxwell Street, the birth of urban blues, and of course we paved it over and tore it down. We did not know, or I didn't know, Madison Street was honky-tonk central. As you say in the book, sex workers, fights every 5 minutes, alcoholic bars, and great, great music. And then Daley paves it through for the highway and destroys that musical center.
Absolutely. So next time you go to a Bulls game, think about what was there beforehand and what was there stretching from the West Loop, what we call now, all the way to really where the United Center is, was a vice district that were basically, it was a stopping point for people coming up from the South, for laborers seeking work, and but almost every block, and I saw a few photos of it, just as evidence too. Every block had rows and rows of these more or less storefront honky-tonks. And once you start looking into what happened there, the police blotters over the years, it was, it's out of a Coen Brothers movie, frankly.
I was thinking of The Hideout.
Yeah, The Hideout, right, exactly.
They're trying to pave that under,
That's
too.
right. Well, one theme of the book, really, again, writing this book over so many years, some things just kind of like emerged out of it. I was watching get brighter and brighter, and one of them was, really the city of Chicago, anytime in every single era when something was becoming successful, a business owner with a music club and a scene starting to form, the city came in and did everything it could to shut it down. It happened, what we're talking about, it happened with the Quiet Night in Lakeview. It happened with the College of Complexes, which was a crazy folk scene, folk club that had to keep moving to get away from the city. It happened with Lounge Acts in Lincoln Park. Was probably the last one in the book that talks about that. And of course, what we're talking about with Hideout. One thing's the city becomes the more affluent the city becomes, and the more control it wants to have, it starts clamping down on these business owners. And so what we're seeing now with the Hideout, or what we saw with Lounge Acts, that story's been going on for decades. Yeah.
We're going to have NASCAR, though.
That's right.
That's exciting. There was one guy, I mean, the Madison Street thing is just phenomenal to me. I did a piece on it a few decades, a while ago, but there was this guitar player, Johnny Pitts, he told me the story. There was like drive-by shootings there, right? And it's basically like rural Southerners who came up to the big city.
It's all the Great Migration.
But the music had this drive and rawness and energy to it. And Pitts was telling me he was playing the guitar, and one night somebody just fired a bunch of rounds into the club and broke the neck off of his guitar while he was playing on stage. And people say the South Side now is rough, I mean,
yeah. No, it was violent, and also the same. I had a great quote there from Charlie Musselwhite, the blues harmonica player, who is fantastic. I saw him a couple of weeks ago perform in New Orleans. I interviewed him because he was a Memphis teenager. He came up to Chicago seeking work, like everybody else he knew, and he would go to the South Side blues clubs, but he lived in Uptown. He worked for an exterminator in Uptown, and that was his day job. So I called him up and I wanted to talk to him, like, what were you seeing in all these clubs? And he said, the people said the South Side blues clubs were really violent. There's a handgun in the drawer of the register and all that other stuff. He said they had nothing on the country bars on the north side, because he said the fights on the south side usually were about something. They were about, you looked at my woman wrong, you owe me money, you stole something from me. The fights on the north side were like, you looked at me wrong. And he said because life had fucked these people over so much that they had nothing left and they were just going to go at it. John Prine, who I interviewed, his dad would take him, I shouldn't say this, his dad would take him to some of these bars before Cubs games. And so his dad told me a story, his dad, of a wisdom he gave his dad of like, hey son, when you're in a bar like this, you always order beers by double. You drink one and you have one at the ready to knock somebody over the head with when they want to pick a fight with you. And he was serious. Yeah.
Well, and then there was the tale about, I loved the Al Grossman anecdotes. Al Grossman, future manager of Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, Janis Joplin, all these iconic figures. Grossman sort of started the modern manager scenario, right? But the Gate of Horn. And he sort of legitimizes the whole folk scene, right? He tries to dress it up a little bit.
Yeah, folk singers were considered hillbillies, more or less. They were in denim and they were just street clothing. He put them in suits, and he made it a respect. He put cocktail tables out, and it became a place for middle-class suburbanites to go after work to go hear these songs. And Bob Gibson was a really entertaining folk singer who was really one of the house performers there. Had a very clean-cut image of presenting songs that were from like decades earlier. So yeah, he cleaned everything up there. And you could see how that method, he formed Peter, Paul, and Mary. He basically put them together and he sold them to America. He sold all the music that was in the Gate of Horn through Peter, Paul, and Mary. And he wanted us to do another trio called the Brown Eyed Girls. And there were 3 women to perform, I think Jo Mapes and 2 other women. But one of them said to him, but I don't have brown eyes. And he said, we'll fix that.
Well, Mark, you covered the alt country explosion, right? And it's interesting giving it context as you do in the book. It's also great migration. We have people coming from Wales. We have people coming from St. Louis. Everybody comes here. Why did bands like Wilco and the extended Langford Meekons family, the Handsome family, how did all these new resurgent country bands wind up in Chicago? Why'd they come here, and what did it do for them?
Well, I think there were a number of reasons. One was a reason why other artists came here during that time period. It was very affordable to live here, and there were a lot of record labels here. It had already established a reputation for rock and punk and all sorts of indie music and jazz, and so it seemed like a really fertile place for musicians to just come here. The musicians that you talk about, I think that what they discovered, what they got when they went here, was freedom, frankly. When I talked to the Handsome family, they weren't really planning to do anything super great when they got here, but when they got here, Chicago looked like it was a pretty dark and grimy place at that time. It was a place where you can kind of get inspired to write, and also you had the freedom to do really whatever you wanted. And I think that sort of thing caught on like wildfire, because there were places to play, there was an audience that was interested in it, and there was this collaborative vibe that you see in other music scenes as well. I mean, Robbie, who will be here tonight, he collaborated with Steve Albini, who is as uncountry as as you might think, but they became natural collaborators on his records, and so I think that sort of thing kind of caught on, that you can live here for pretty cheap, but also you have this like really amazing group of musicians here that you can start collaborating. So all of a sudden you start seeing it. All the people you mentioned just start working with one another. Yeah.
Well, and even we're sort of drawing the link to the what happened in the '90s, a very exciting period for Chicago with all these groups experimenting within the framework of country music. Langford, the man from Wales that Jim mentioned, the Meekons guy, just a terrific musician, artist. I said, what's this country music thing? He says, well, we tried to imitate it, but we got it so wrong that we created our own thing out of it. And that was kind of like what it was. It was like, okay, your mistakes became your sound. And that was cool.
And I don't think it would have been able to, I think there were little scenes in other cities, but I don't think it would have been able to really flourish as it did because of the size of Chicago and the number of musicians here. And I think that sort of, just kind of the middle finger to other cities that thought they were cooler than Chicago. It's like, no, we're going to do something very original here. We're going to do our own thing. And you saw how that really grew and grew, and you saw these artists then who basically are, in my estimation, sort of the premier Americana artists today, had roots in Chicago at some period of time during that time period.
Well, Mark, the Sound Opinions aesthetic. Everybody's a critic, and this is a positive book, lauding Chicago. But talk a little bit about, from all of the eras, the country music out of Chicago versus the crap that comes from mainstream Nashville. And there's a political difference. We were all Reds here. And they were wearing their MAGA hats in Nashville.
Well, you're really setting me up there, Jim.
I am. Wait, we needed something for the radio, Mark. Come on.
Well, I think that country music definitely became this. There's critics here who can say that what you're hearing in the super mainstream, it's gone as far beyond as you can even imagine of what country music is, and far beyond its even roots. Even going back to the '90s, Garth Brooks seems like a traditionalist today. Frankly, he really does.
Yeah. It's pop music.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because at that time he was kind of, boy, where's things going? He's as much of a traditionalist than I think compared to really what's out there. I think that it's such a segmented music now, like all pop music, that you can't. The labels are sort of meaningless now. Like what is country music now? And I think that it took having to go through that period of whatever you wanted to call it, alt country, and kind of keep circling back to the roots of the music to really be where we're at today. That because the pop stuff has gone as far in that direction as it could go, and so if you like that stuff, great. But now there's, what we're seeing now is that Americana, we have the Americana Music Awards. There's a Grammy category now for Americana music. That music is incredibly mainstream now, so you can find that music now, whereas before it was indie labels and indie clubs, and now those artists are playing places like the Chicago Theater and are heard on radio.
The whole notion of Chicago being this sort of hidden enclave of country music. Jim, you wanted to ask about Robbie's exploits at the the R&R Lounge downtown, the Loop. The R&R Ranch.
Was that before I got high or after?
That was before you got high.
I have no idea
You're high
what
now.
you're talking about.
Well, the Sundowners.
Oh, the
Let's talk about the
Sundowners.
Sundowners.
Okay.
The Sundowners.
So
Yeah.
I'm
Why
thinking-
did you just say that? I wanted you to tell the story of the Sundowners, and the Sun-Times excerpted it, and it's great in the book. It's great in the paper.
Sure, yeah. So the Sundowners is this, I'm waiting for someone to make a film about them, because it's sort of this group that existed for 3 decades in a subterranean bar talk about an improbable story, improbable scenario. This band playing, 7 sets a night or whatever it is, 5-6 nights a week, and for 3 decades in the same place. And it did move, but... And so what they were 3 Southern. They just thought they were working class musicians, and so they did something I think that was brilliant. They just stayed put, and they stayed put, and the audience came to them, and they had an audience of tourists, politicians, media types, and then eventually, as the '80s roll around, sort of people like John Langford were walking down the stairs. I know Robbie saw them, and anyone who was of that in their 20s in the '80s was showing up there. And they opened the doors to all those people and let them come on stage, let them play guitar with them, let them sing with them, kind of showed them what it's like, what the lifestyle's really like. You had to be really good. And they were incredible players, and they knew 15,000 songs. That's not an exaggeration. 15,000 songs.
They were amazing, and in the '80s they were sort of holding down the fort for that sound, right in the Loop, like near the Greyhound bus station or something like that, right? But the link there to what was the folk scene was about. The University of Chicago Festival was very about the community, and everybody can play. Nobody's voice is, everybody can sing. The whole idea that you all have something in here that needs to be expressed, and that's okay. And what I loved about them, the Sundowners, they were so generous, as you alluded to. If you showed up with an instrument, you're probably going to be getting up on stage with them at some point in the evening. And the beauty of it was they'd give you the stage, but Don, the guitar player, would sort of hang with you just to make sure, hey, we're going to stay in key, we're going to be on the song here, we're going to do Lost Highway by Hank Williams, and we're going to get through this together. And I love that. I thought that was just so
That's
the
right.
spirit of what this whole Chicago thing was all about.
A lot of the musicians would say to them, or would tell me that they on the stage would tell them all right, now go like they would be giving him ways. It's this while they were playing, it's like this, and it's amazing that these guys and those guys, the younger musicians, they revere them today. They love them. I didn't hear anyone say any bad word about any of those guys. I think because they were so welcoming. And then what's amazing is that the Sundowners start playing places like the Club Lower Links, where there are punk rockers in another subterranean bar under Links Hall in Lakeview.
Postmodern video art and performance art.
That's right. So all these Art
poetry
Institute
slams.
students are doing crazy performance art in the 70s, and then you have these 3 country guys with the hats, and they're playing full sets at Club Lower Links. And that moment in time was really the start. That was the start of this kind of melding of these kind of punk rockers, art art kids with the country music stuff, and there was respect all around. It wasn't sort of like a thing, well, we're kind of making fun of this, it's ironic, because a lot of that stuff came later, where people just wear Western shirts and kind of wink at the music. Yeah. No, we love this, and we love the fact that there's something happening here over generations. It's a beautiful thing, and I think that sort of exchange between generations happens a lot in the book and among these musicians. That's why I wanted to dedicate the book to musicians, because I felt the generosity of spirit. It's amazing.
Well, you and I talked a little bit about this a few days ago, but I thought there was a really great point that you made, that you became the music critic at the Herald, Daily Herald in '97. And you were sort of right in the middle of this whole era where this alt country thing was becoming growing out of a Chicago thing into this national thing, and really became quite amazing, because there were so many great bands. So who's the unsung band from that huge pool of talent that we had here, in your mind?
At that time, I think the band, boy, there's a lot of them. A band, I could talk about a band that's still around, that is, I think, Steve Dawson, the songwriter Steve Dawson. And I think this guy, as a songwriter, boy, he could go to Nashville and just clean their clocks with all his songs and his singing and the records that his band Dolly Varden has put out. I think also Danny Black from the Blacks.
I was wondering if you were going to bring up the Blacks.
The Blacks were great.
The Blacks were around for just like a minute. They put out 2 records, 1 EP, but you will find no more charismatic group of musicians and primal musicians on stage than those crazy foursome. And Danny, when he performs solo, it's amazing. He's such a charismatic guy, but his songs are really. He has a real understanding of the older country music as well. People kind of would see just kind of some of the antics on stage. They would wear wigs. He would wear a preacher's outfit, and that stuff went away over time. But I think that it was easy to kind of focus on that stuff. I think glam country was a term that was kind of came out of that. But as a songwriter, his stuff is very, very deep. And I'm kind of on a mission, as we all are, when we hook on to people we love, just to we want the spotlight on them, more. And so I want him to come back and play more shows. Yeah.
Yeah, they were great. Yeah. How are we doing on time? Are we good?
I think it's time to take some questions.
Okay. Let's take some questions.
All right, folks. So we have about 5 minutes for questions. So if I could see a show of hands of anybody who's interested in asking one, we'll keep it brief. Please just state your name and ask your question. Thank you so much. Got our first one right over here.
As someone who used to frequent the Earl of Old Town and Steve Goodman and John Prine and Bonnie Kulak in my high school years when you could still get in those clubs, what do you think the influence was on Chicago?
Yeah, that's one thing we didn't touch upon, was that whole chapter and more on that scene. So much is talked about the Greenwich Village folk scene, but the Greenwich Village folk scene lasted it was a very short period of time. Once people got famous, it was shut down, and it was really only in coffee shops and small little music rooms. But in Chicago, a second folk boom happened in the 70s, and I think that was amazing. It was the singer-songwriter era of the 70s, of course, as we all know. But in Chicago, there were clubs dedicated to singer-songwriters, and there was actually a bluegrass club in Chicago, just bluegrass. So there was so naturally a scene formed, and that's where the people you mentioned, Prine and Bonnie Kulak, and people like Michael Smith, and grew out of that. And it was a really, really healthy scene, and lasted probably about 10 years, probably the longest. Of all the scenes in the book. So I think it was really, really important, because I think going back to the Old Town School, it was about the song. I think the song was always primal in the city.
Any more questions, folks? Here we go. Bear with me.
Hi, thank you. Nancy here. When you mentioned the different genres from Chicago, you left out jazz. Am I wrong to think that jazz was instrumental here?
I mean, jazz, yeah, absolutely. Starting with Louis Armstrong all the way up to Ken Vandermark.
Louis came here from New Orleans in the 20s and some
Made
of
his
his
seminal
hottest stuff.
recordings in Richmond, Indiana. Look it up. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that was just a flub, but yeah, absolutely, just as important as blues and gospel, for sure.
2120 South Michigan Avenue. There's no rock and roll without the recordings there. And that was the second thing they did after Electric Blues, Muddy Waters. You know. Yeah, I mean, Chicago's the shit, man. But we shit on our musical history, right? You know, Chess Records is supposed to be a museum. It's never open. When it is open, there's nothing there. We tore down Maxwell Street. Salem Baptist Church, birthplace of gospel, burns down in a fire, then gets knocked over in a windstorm, and it's a shell of a building. And they just had to fight to preserve the warehouse where all modern electronic dance music was born. I do not understand how cities like Memphis and Nashville and Austin, Texas, can preserve their musical history when we do nothing to honor this city and its history. You know, it's really. We got a new mayor, though. Maybe.
I can explain it maybe, I'll explain it in 20 seconds. I think Chicago's always seen the arts as the fine arts. Organizations that take government money, the orchestras, the art museums, the ballet companies, blues music, jazz music, country music, those comes from bars, you know, and I think the city just always had a bad problem with bars, always tried to shut down bars. The second Daley was proud. He wanted to shut down half the city's bars. And I think that is somehow connected to why, but popular music was incubated in creative scenes inside places where people drink, saloons, tavern, bars.
Yeah, those people were troublemakers. That's the way the city viewed it. I mean, the
Or
cops
poor
shut
people
down.
of color in the case of gospel.
Yeah.
Yeah, troublemakers, right? Everybody was cast. If you weren't a white person in the city doing legitimate music, you were considered a problem.
You think we have FBI files?
I'm going to FOIA that tomorrow.
There will be
It'll give
now.
me about 5 years.
We'll have some now, yeah.
All right, we've got another question all the way
Anybody
over
else?
to your left, all the way over here.
Well, hi. There's so much discussion about migrants from the South carrying on the sound, but there were a lot of people from the Midwest, right? How prevalent was that? Was it totally dominated by Southerners, or was there a big presence of Midwesterners in the past?
There were people on the barn dance who were from the Midwest. Yeah, absolutely. There was a group called the DeRogatis sisters, and they were a vocal group. They were from Wisconsin. So there were a lot of performers from the barn dance. Win Strachey was born in Chicago, and he was on the barn dance. So that's for sure. But there were also people who were descendants. You know, John Prine, his family is the archetypal family of the book. You know, his family moved up from Kentucky, and they went. The only reason they came up here was because of the American Can Company in Maywood, Illinois, because it had jobs. And so they would every summer they would go back to Kentucky to visit the relatives, or the relatives would come up and fill up their house in Maywood. So there was some connection to the South, even though like someone like him was more or less a Chicagoan.
All right, we have our final question right here.
So I'm curious what you all think Chicago's musical future is, and is it anything this audience would be interested in?
Give me 3 hours for that one. No. I mean, I would have to say what's going on now is really interesting in that because of streaming and everything, the record labels are mattering less, but the live performance thing is taking off. You can't walk down the street without bumping into some sort of live performance. They're happening in distilleries, bookstores. There's a pottery studio in Rogers Park that puts on music regularly. Wine shops. I mean, and all the other music rooms as well. So it's there's much more music in this vein, the country and folk vein, than there had really been even since the days of this book. So I think it's a really healthy scene. Is there a massive recording scene? I don't know as much. And I think that has to do with sort of the bigger picture of the difficulties it is to make records today and sell them.
Well, and to answer that question, to amplify what Mark is saying, I think Chicago is always innovating. I mean, we left out so many genres, industrial music, that was my scene, wax tracks, records, I lived in that place. And you could see like a scene taking place there. Like that music changed the world. House music, that got made in people's basements, and it changed the world. That's happening right now. Fulks, Robbie wrote a nice intro to the book, and he said one of the reasons he wanted to live in Chicago, he said, the second city syndrome, the provincialism, he got all that part of it, but the freedom that created, he said, the freedom experienced in working out of view of the industry with all its chatter and dull consensus. And Chicago never had that sort of industry vibe hanging over it where you had to conform. In fact, it celebrated nonconformity. And you had places to play, places to record, places to sell your music, a huge fan base. People go out all the time here.
And people to collaborate with, too. Yeah. I think you see that cross-pollination constantly over the years of, Bonnie Kolak, someone mentioned over here. If you look at her records, you had some of the greatest jazz players in Chicago playing on her records. These weren't country players, they were jazz guys like Phil Upchurch were on her records. John Langford kind of putting everybody together from every genre. Robbie with Steve Albini. Jeff Tweedy collaborating with Mavis Staples. So that is a north side and a south side story coming together.
Go back to Sun Ra and the orchestra,
yeah,
and all the roots of modern jazz in Chicago. One way or another, touch back to that.
Yeah, and I think would that really happen in an industry town where the competition is pretty fierce to get on TV and all that? I don't know about that. Those people, if you wanted that, you could find that in other cities. But but to kind of make that happen here and to grow as an artist and be a very strange person and grow as an artist, that was encouraged. And so that's the kind of a very encouraging thing, and was never really, one thing about with this book, I grew up with a lot of baby boomer nostalgia. I grew up with like the Vietnam era, Woodstock, the psych scene in San Francisco with the Grateful Dead, the New York punk scene, stuff that I loved and I learned a lot about, and I saw the documentaries and read the book. It wasn't until the 90s I thought, I always wished I had something of my own, of my own generation. And it really was that scene that really I was watching kind of come to life, and saw all these artists like Robbie. He's got 13 records, and every single one's like amazing. After the one before then, Dolly Varden, Wilco, completely evolved in front of our eyes in front of that. So I kind of recognized that was actually happening here during my lifetime, and it was very exciting. And I think that's what really kind of led me to this book.
Good place to end.
Thank you so much, everybody. Another round of applause.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you.
Well, sitting on the front porch, face toward the hill, a trail of years behind me and a night ahead to kill. One glass of whiskey to ease my mind, and another one to take it too far away to find. Staring up at the mountain like to drive me mad. The mountain never changes, so I guess I better had one glass of whiskey to ease my mind, and another one to take it too far away to find. Robbie! You know I came to the city with the plan to get rich fast. Next time I'll take the money and I'll put the plan last. one glass of whiskey to ease my mind, and another one to take it too far away to find. These LA bars are friendly, small town bars are rough. I don't need no more unkindness, the memory's enough. One glass of whiskey to ease my mind, and another one to take it too far away to find. And when I feel I'm sinking low, I reach for the first friend I see. All I need's to look at him and know he's sinking faster than me. Well, life gets stranger the more it goes on. It's a wonder how I worry when nothing's really wrong. One glass of whiskey to ease my mind, and another one to take it too far away to find. One glass of whiskey to ease my mind, and another one to take it too far away to find. Woo. Yeah, all right. I never knew this place had so much empty space until tonight when you walked right out the door. And so I walked, to our bedside, and I pulled out that 45 that laid for years behind our chest of drawers. At first it looked too worn to play the label off, but washed away, then I made out the name of my old friend. 30 years and a scratch or two. Oh, but when the needle hit the groove, I knew that it was crying time again. The buck starts here with Hank sure to follow. Turn him up loud and clear. He's singing my sorrow. Let the sad songs roll on through a house filled with tears, where the good times are gone. The buck starts here. People in the house next door think I'm tearing up the floor. It's 4:30 and my light's burning bright. But this occasion is no big deal. It's just some boys from Bakersfield that came around to help me through the night. The buck starts here with Hank sure to follow. Turn him up loud and clear. He's singing my sorrow. Let the sad songs roll on through a house filled with tears, where the good times are gone. The buck starts here. Yeah, where the good times are gone. The buck starts here. Right. Oh, well. Hey, sweet little Cora May, you'd be in my spell if I could sing that well. Hey, good old Cora May, you're no good to me, gone. I can't find the old groove since you left me. I stumble round as if in a dream. I stare at the morning paper and I wonder what the strange words mean. A week, a month, and no break from the heartbreak. So I got my mom on the phone. She said all you'd ever done for me was poison my heart. Oh, but we all know that Mama was against you from the start. Hey, sweet little Cora May, if there was a way, I'd sure use the way. Hey, good old Cora May, you're no good to me, gone. Now it's true I snuck a few looks at your sister the day she wore that halter top and thong. But what law says just for looking a man should have to suffer this long? Oh, and if I once believed I loved you only, I believe that twice as much now. And if you miss me just a little, well, imagine how I feel. 'Cause when we're split in two, I get the worst end of the deal. Hey, sweet little Cora May, you've made your point known. Now it's time you came home. Hey, good old Cora May, all you ever seem to do hurts me and not you. Hey, sweet little Cora May, back when we shared a bed, girl, you wrapped around my head just like the sweetest song. But you're no good to me, gone. Thanks, guys. It's wow. It's nice to see shit, you know? That's nice to see some shit out there. Not that you guys are shit or anything, but it's just nice to see some shit. I haven't played here in quite a while. In fact, I haven't played here many times in my life. It's a little bit too nice of a room for me. But I played here, I think maybe 4 or 5 times since I moved to Chicago. And they've all been memorable, once with Lucinda Williams, once with Peter Wolf, once by myself with my loud band, and maybe I'm missing a time or two in there. But anyway, here we are at the Park West, this fancy, nice venue, talking about grungy country music in a panel discussion. Isn't that great? I'm going to introduce you to these fellows up here in just a second, and the last one was a tune from my new record, which I'm also hawking. Like Mark is hawking his books, I'm hawking my stuff out there too. So, yeah, it's a night of buying things and of appreciating the humanities and talking about Chicago history. And I don't know if I'm going to tell this story if we. It's a long story, and I don't think we have enough time in the set, but. Previously, my last appearance at the Chicago Humanities, which was where I met Larry, the bass player, was about 8 or 9 years ago, and it was one of the worst gigs of my life. But it's a funny story, and it's a gig that is now known as the Oxbow incident. Sorry, that's a Woody Allen joke that I stole, but I thought it was a funny joke. But yeah, the gig was not so great, and. I think that Chicago Humanities Council has probably completely turned over its staff by now, so that I might be able to tell the story in a little bit. I'll be thinking about that. But anyway, everything that Mark said, well, most of it was totally true. As Mark Twain said there, he might have told a few stretchers in there, but it was mostly true. And for instance, you know, the socialization of the musicians in Chicago, and the fact, I mean, I think he said that it was free. You know, there's a lot of freedom here, which is true. You know, that's a nice way to put it. There's not a music industry here, so really, you know, there's clubs. There's great clubs to play at, and there's great musicians here, but there's not big labels, and there's not publishers, and there's all that infrastructure that the big music towns have is not here. So as a result, it's free. And also, like the country musicians in town always seem, maybe I'm exaggerating this a little bit, but since when I first moved here in 1983, August 1983, it's always seemed to me that there's been like 12 or so musicians that play country music in town. I know there's a lot more than that, but the ones whose paths I like, the ones I play with a lot and know well, there's always been like 10 or 12, and they switch out a little bit over the years, but a small number. And so, like Mark said, that I work with this punk engineer, Steve Albini, and that's true. And you know, there isn't a country engineer here, so it's like, I'll work with that guy. I don't care what kind of music he records, you know, and it's kind of the same thing about, you know, writing tunes and playing with other musicians, you know. It's not like, if it was just country musicians like it is in Nashville, I think I would have gone down a rabbit hole and just known people like that, and that's cool too. You get on the same wavelength that everybody around you, but it's kind of it can be kind of oppressive, I think. I mean, you guys live in Nashville. Is it kind of like, everybody's into the same thing and it gets too samey after a while, or what do you think? You're a good talker.
Sometimes. I mean, yeah. I do see that in Nashville from time to time. I feel like every few years, like, someone will do something and then other people kind of jump on that bandwagon a little bit, you know?
There's a
To
bandwagon
some degree.
effect. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit.
There might be that here. There might be that here too. I don't know. We're gonna do a song that, now that we're finished talking about that, I don't know if that was too enlightening or not, but sometimes I just talk. Y'all got to stop me if I talk too much. We're going to do a song that I don't do too much, but we're doing it this week. We're playing a lot this week in Chicago. We're playing here, and then tomorrow at Space, and then on Saturday again at Space. So don't come to those, you know, because it's going to be the same goddamn songs, I think, pretty much every show. Very, very little mixing it up. So mean, if you love this song, yeah, go ahead and come. But this one is from a record that I did do with Steve Albini. Now that I mentioned it, we did it at his place in, I think in 2012 or 13, and it was called Gone Away Backward. And there's a tune on that thing that I got to listen to recently, and I thought, oh, this is a pretty good song. I never do this one. We're going to try it for you now. It's called The Many Disguises of God, and it goes like this. Bright blazed the sun on the day you were born. Red ran the flowering vine. I felt it then like the prick of a thorn. Someone so tender and kind. Watching. I left your mother sleeping and still to walk for a while neath the sky. I climbed the side of a crooked old hill, reaching the crest I did spy. Soldiers. As you press on to the future's fair land, child, spare a glance back where you came. For over your cradle a lone figure stands. History tells us his name. Adam. The wings of the angel you sing, o'er these hospital walls you would fly, and my so-called crimes would go small like a dream, and there to your wandering eye a mountain face, lashed jagged by the sea, the plow's steady churn, the impress of hooves in the clay, a rusted gray shed, jammed with gunpowder and gold, a vine-clotted field where families once gathered to die, seaports, depots, where the goods of all lands freely flow, a signpost to a town no longer there, an arrow, a sail that no man shot nor can slow, forms mighty and small, scrambling round looking for food. Beyond rushing plains, the soft lights just beyond 10,000 the same. One child who is not the chair by the wall, a rocking the dreadful day through, the hand of love withdrawn. The many disguises of God, the many disguises of God, the many disguises of God. Thank you. We're going to play you a couple songs from the new one right now. This one is one that I because my wife and I moved a couple years ago. We were sad to leave here. We'd been here for 36 years, or I had. She'd been here for longer. And we moved to Los Angeles for no particular reason. My wife's job, it made sense with, but mine, country singer, doesn't make any sense. And not that Chicago made a ton of sense either, but anyway, to my great surprise, kind of like it there. The weather's always good, for one thing. And my neighbor has a place in the desert where I go write songs, so it's super. Doesn't that sound arty? You go escape to the desert and do paintings or write songs. So anyway, I was out there one time. I started working on this song, and I had the first verse down. I'm like, what the hell is this? You know, it's got these weighty themes in it. It's got a kid who's listening to songs on the radio and dreaming about being stepping into that world, being a musician. But he's stuck on a farm, kind of in the middle of nowhere, dreaming of getting away to the big city. And meanwhile, he has a poor relationship with his father. And I looked down at this and I said, oh, it's about me. That's what it's about. And that was interesting, but like to go on with the song past the first verse was a little bit of a challenge because the first verse seemed kind of complete unto itself. But anyway, so I did, and I went on and on with it. It turned into a little bit of an epic or something. And to wrap it up at the end, just to warn you, there's an epilogue. This is the first epilogue that I've written in a song. Most of my songs, I mean, it might sound a little pretentious, but it seemed to want to wrap up, you know, all these loose threads that are hanging out in the song. So when you hear a rest about 4 minutes in, do not clap. You see your neighbor start to go like that, just like push his hands down violently on the table or something, and because there's going to be another like 30, 40 seconds of the song after that. So this one's called Angels Carry Me. Any old somewhere may call you when you're a middle of nowhere kid with Tennessee and California either side of your head. The radio gods whispered a promise of easy work and no hands, and that's how I became a star-struck fool and a stranger to my old man. Now I close my eyes and I see that wood pile and the creek just past the trees, and a neighbor girl whose true intentions I never could quite read. Search me why I still carry this dog-eared book of dead names. All you ever gave me was blows to the heart, and I love you just the same. Didn't I make myself clear? When are you gonna get wise? Don't come around me and my friends up here with your clodhoppers and your big dumb eyes. All you ever gave me was a fear of God and this slow way of talking I can't disguise. Yeah, I go by my second name now. And I was stumbling, but I soon hit stride. Yeah, with nothing but a road before you. Well, you just learn how to ride. And that's me at the wheel, me on the radio. We're sailing down the 101. This is the last $100 I'll need from you, Dad. Lord, I feel like my time is. Yeah, my time is. Tonight I'll shout my story and shout myself wrong. Oh, from the footlights before me, straight clear to Arkansas. And tonight the whole town's in the hands of the man with the microphone. Here's one you may remember. Angels carry me home. Kid, I'm sorry. Wish I could offer you something. I'm still out there and I'm still stumbling. There was no God on the radio, only a breeze passing through. But that old farm, your first love, your father's tears were somehow eternal and true. And old folks never do get out of nowhere. It's a sad thing to say, and only a fool thinks he can leave just by driving away. Thank you.
That seems so easy. Must have choked.
All right, I think I will introduce these guys at this juncture in the show. They're working so hard for y'all, and they appreciate you applauding when they do something good, which, let's face it, isn't all the time, but when they do something good, you gotta let them know. They love to hear that, because they don't get much respect or money out of me, God knows, and we depend on the audience to like really prop these guys up. Over here on the mandolin, my good friend, he's from born Miami, Florida, for some reason nobody knows, and he got Ron DeSantis on the mandolin. I'm kidding. He can't play no mandolin, that guy. When did you get into country music? I don't think I know this story. Were you in it from, or bluegrass, from a young age?
Well, I got into country probably when I was a teenager, young teenager. I'd listen to country. Well, actually, maybe younger than that. I guess it depends what you consider country. We used to go on family vacations in our van, and I was one of 3 kids, and my parents used to play the Oak Ridge Boys on cassette tapes. And the Oak Ridge Boys, Lionel Richie, Beach Boys, and I'm trying to remember who else. But then, because they kind of put the sound in my head, and I didn't get into bluegrass until I was probably 17 years old. It's the first time I really heard bluegrass music. And I loved it. I fell in love with it immediately.
It is good. You know what song I like? It is Oak Ridge Boys. I mean, Elvira is good and everything, but I like that. Yeah.
What American
Hey,
Man?
Mary. I like that one. Do you know that one by Sonny Throckmorton? It goes, trying, how about trying to love two women is like a ball and chain. You know that one? Trying to love two women is like a ball and chain. Sometimes the pleasure isn't worth the strain. It's a long old grind, and it tires your mind.
Yeah.
Trying to love two women, help me out, is tearing me apart. Trying to love two women is tearing me apart. One owns my body and the other one's got my heart. It's a long old grind, and it untires your mind. I love that one. I like that one.
My brother and I used to listen to the one,
I got a Nikon camera, a Sony color TV.
remember that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, American
Yeah.
Made.
That's a good one. I get them confused with Alabama sometimes, but they both had a guy going. Scott Seaman-Taki on the mandolin, by the way. On the bass, our only Chicagoan, who I think he's probably going through trauma right now, because we all were on the plane yesterday coming up here from the south, and that was horrible. Like, people were screaming half the way to here because the plane was doing some weird moves and there was thunderstorms. So he had that happen today. Then on the way here today, he had a car accident. So give it up. He's doing fine, though. Look at him. He's handsome. Handsome guy. He's got it all together, holding it down on the low end over here. Larry Kohut. Give it up for Larry. Larry! And on the fiddle, a young man that I've been working with for over 10 years now, I think. I met him through Mike Bubb a long time ago. If y'all follow the bluegrass music, you know Mike is one of the great guys. And he's one of the great guys, too. He used to travel around the northern reaches of Wisconsin when he was a young man, doing work for the Jehovah's Witnesses and playing the bluegrass music with his family. He's laughing because it's true. But he got out of the Jehovah scene after that, and wasn't too easy, but he did manage to escape and deprogram himself and join society, and we welcome him with open arms. His name is Shad Cobb here on the violin. And sorry, I don't know what got into me there. I'm not into religion, but that's just me. Let's do something we weren't planning to do right now. We got an instrumental on the new record. Now that I've introduced everybody, it makes sense to hear him play a little bit. So this is one that I made up. I was in Burbank when I made this one up, but instead of calling it the Burbank something or other, I thought, well, that sounds silly. Johnny Carson made a big joke out of Burbank a long time ago. So I called it the Silver Lake Reel. That's a prettier name, and Silver Lake is right alongside Burbank. So it goes like this. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Well. This song starts like that. It goes, well. It's not as good as the John Langford song I heard him sing at a festival not long ago. This song starts with John yelling, silence! This is a true story. It starts, well. Daddy packed a van full of camping gear. Mama filled the ice chest up with beer, and I rode shotgun all the way up Route 15. It seemed every picker in the USA had landed in a Culpeper field that day. 50 years gone, I'm still grooving on that scene. There was old men doing the buck and wing, young gal skinny dipping in the spring, while the singing and the fiddling and the feedback filled the air. While Mom and Daddy were getting fried, I was sitting there with my eyeballs wide, just coming straight at me off of the stage, just like a demon with a hypno ray, stealing my mind away. It was that long hair bluegrass, setting my young spirit free. Yeah, that long hair bluegrass, a little rough and shaggy, but man, it spoke to me. Yeah, how a fella looks. If the song is true and is playing Cooks, I might have known that I was just a dumb old kid. Those hippies knew Bob Marley note for note, and they didn't shove religion down your throat, and I was pretty sure they smoked dope like I did. There'd have been police and pepper spray if a few old timers had had their way. Old Dr. Ralph Stanley looked a little. Yeah, but anyone with ears could not deny Blake on the guitar, Tony on the five. There was something in the air for sure. It wasn't all peace and make love, not war. No, it was something more. It was that long hair bluegrass. That was the sound of 73. Yeah, that long hair bluegrass. Man, it swept the South and it swept over me. That's a name I adore, and John Hartford. Just to drop one more, and don't forget the nitty-gritty band, Earl Scruggs and his sons, Mr. Dave Grisman, and Ian Monroe is still the king. But now his church has a new wing where an outcast like me can feel at home. Singing that long hair bluegrass, just like Sam said it should be. Yeah, that long hair bluegrass. Well, it wasn't all the greatest songs, and the solos were a little long, but it spoke to me strong, and it still speaks to me. Long hair bluegrass. How do they do it? Long hair, bluegrass. That's that one. Yeah. I know. If y'all aren't into that style of music, that was probably pretty inside baseball there. I dropped a bunch of names. But that did happen to me when I was 10, 11 years old. These freakazoids took over the bluegrass scene. It was really exciting for a guy like me. And we went up to Culpeper near where we lived in Virginia, like the song says, and saw these guys, Sam Bush, Tony Trischka, all these people. And it's true, some of those old timers did look at him like that. But those young people, they stayed around. They were too good to exclude from the music, and most of them are still going strong now, today. You know, David Grisman I mentioned, and the Nitty Gritty guys, and Sam. All those guys are still going real strong. They're in their 70s, super healthy, still smoking the weed, still doing the music. I wish I knew. So where do we get weed in this town, by the way? Because everywhere.
Just inhale.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it's legal. I'm very anti-weed personally, but these guys were telling me the other day, because we were talking about Billy Strings, you know that guy, that entertainer? He's such a great guitar player, but it's also like, I said, like, that guy plays to like at least 5 times as many people in his audience as the next most popular bluegrass entertainer of all time, you know, like, what's the secret? And these guys go, I think it's the weed. Like really, like when he puts out Instagram video, it's of him and all of his backstage people passing around joints that are this big. And anyway, the last time I smoked marijuana was like 1981, I think. And I didn't like it at all. I said, I'm never doing this again, and I never did. But to get an audience that big, I would definitely do it again. So if any of you guys know where to direct us to a joint that's this big, then we will put out a video and get the thing rolling, you know. It's no time like when you're 60 years old to start building your audience, you know, I think. Let's do, well, that's 3 in A, isn't it? Well, let's do it anyway. They forgot what key we were playing in just now. It's been so long. This is another tune from Gone Way Backward. I think that's what it's on. It's about a guy in a small town having troubles in America. Daddy used to catch his supper in this river, now you can't swim it. It smells like a 20-ton truck full of paint thinner sank down in it. Come visit a spell, see the plaque to our war fallen. Nothing but a good time. Some guy in Bombay is running that press I used to hate. Now I sling hash for what all spills off the interstate. We sold the family store, left the building standing. You can see the outline where I fell. Might look like hell. From a jet airplane or the top of some big hotel. I'd have chose a place more fine, but the choice was never mine. And so I dwell where I fell. Skinny hip Jane with her long black lashes and a kid of 10 comes by for some TV and to leg it down with me every now and again. She's a good old girl I should have long sent walking. The timing never worked right. And it's the same sad crew at Delilah shouting over the redneck band. Game scored, Trump rally, World War, I don't give a good goddamn. And that's me crossing the courthouse lawn about midnight, tripping at the curbside where I fell. Might look like hell from a jet airplane or the top of some big hotel. I'd have chose a place more fine, but the choice was never mine. And so I dwell where I fell. I just dwell where I fell. Thank you. Some rule from the sky, some inch across the ground. Flipping backs turn to all heaven above sends down. Scratch and pull from this earth what gold it may give. Fattening on feast to come, laboring now to live. And America is a hard religion. Not just anyone may enter. America is a hard religion. Some never do surrender. Land, mother knows not why, to plant a seed in rocky soil and perhaps to die. Freedom come it may to this child instead. Freedom comes, freedom goes, father is surely dead. And America is a hard religion. Not just anyone may enter. America is a hard religion. Some never do surrender. Yet we soldier on, trials to test our hearts, doubts to make us strong. Cheered by loved ones that from the graveyard say, all my tears surely gone after I fly away. And America is a hard religion. Not just anyone may enter. America is a hard religion. Some never do surrender.
Let's do
that's all that she left me. My friends say I should find a new direction and forget these blues, but I don't even have to choose. Tears only run one way, never back away they came. Tears only run one way, and that's down, down, down. Our love ran wild, it brought us low and it took us higher than the skies. Man, it was a real ride. We kissed and we fought. Yeah, we ran cold and hot, but there's no two ways about the way I feel right now. Tears only run one way, never back away they came. Tears only run one way, and that's down, down, down. Well, just like that river flowed, tear won't be controlled. Though many fools have tried, not one has turned the tide. And I can start to drive her from my heart, no matter how hard I burn down the road of no return. Tears only run one way, never back away they came. Tears only run one way, and that's down, down, down. Tears only run one way, never back away they came. Tears only run one way, and that's down, down, down. I hear the wine talking, I think. I hear the wine talking. All right. Another song about drinking right now. Hey, 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 hey. Yeah, I'm an alcoholic too. All right. Love it, love it. It's one of my themes, for sure. It's one of the 4 things that I write about. And this one's from our thumb drive. My thumb drive, is not ours. We didn't work on it, this quartet, but I'd worked on it with a lot of different people. It's got 53 songs on it, and I've been selling it for a year, 2, 3, and it's one of the beautiful, beautiful products that's out there at the table. One of the things that makes me very happy to come to Chicago is playing shows, but the other one is seeing my grandson, who's actually I've got 2 grandchildren that live here, and the one of them, he's the best grandchild of all the grandchildren. I mean, not of my 2, but of all yours, of anybody's. It's like objectively the best. He's really wonderful, and he's getting to that age where it's time for some sex education, you know what I mean? Like the age of 9. And when my kid was 9, there was a... it still kind of makes me laugh. When Preston was 9, don't tell him I told you this, by the way. It came to pass, they said, oh, the class is going to the Robert Crown Center tomorrow. They said, Robert Crown Center, it's big day, Skokie, Robert Crown. Going to learn all about sexual intercourse with humans. And I remember Preston and I were sitting in the den, and I decided, I should really say, because I hadn't said anything to him about this grisly subject before, so I said, Preston, so you're going to the Robert Crown Center tomorrow? He says, yeah. And I said, and I just want to know if you have any questions for me before you get into it with, the authorities over there. He said, no, Dad, no, I don't have it. I know all about. I said, okay, you know about sex, human sexuality? He said, yes, I know about human sexuality, Dad. And I said, so you know, like the penis goes in the vagina? He goes, yes, I know that. Wait, what?
Wait, what?
That's one story. And a related story. Let's see if I can find this here. It took me like a minute to find the other night when I was telling this story. I think I can tell without looking at the text. Because my 9-year-old grandson is now going into sex education. No, that's not true. What happened was that they had a substitute teacher, and I'll tell without looking at the thing. They had a substitute teacher, and she said, now you're going to have free time, and I'm going to be sitting here doing nothing. Y'all can do whatever you want. And my son said to him, so what did you guys do during the free time? And my grandson said, we looked up dirty words in the dictionary. And my son says, what such as? And my grandson said, oh, you know, sausages, urinary bladder, pussy. And this is my second attempt to enliven the Chicago Humanities Festival with some filthy banter. The first time was the Oxbow incident. This time, I think it went a little better, but there's a little hesitation. Anyway, this song about alcohol, as I said, and super country song, and it's on that thumb drive there. It's in the key of F, and we'll send it out to whoever likes to drink wine. I swore when she dumped me, being my own company wouldn't break me. I'm no sentimental throwback, though you might not know that from me lately. It's been hell trying to fight back her memory, but tonight I'm making a start. For I call an old friend in, and just listening to him's doing wonders for my heart. Now I hear the wine talking, it's saying more wine. It cries and that it is young, and this feeling's feeling awful fine. The hour's not that late, you're still walking straight, and she's not quite forgotten. Yeah. Urinary bladder. Hey there, Mr. Lonely, I'm the light you only need to let in. Another glass back, so you're on the fast track to forgetting. Or am I slowly going crazy? I'm beginning to have my fears. Oh, there's no one else around, and still the same old sound keeps ringing in my ears. I can hear the wine talking, and it's saying more wine, more. It cries and then is young, and this feeling's feeling awful fine. Don't leave me half empty. This ain't no time to be stopping. For the hour's not that late, you're still walking straight, and she's not quite forgotten. Oh, the hour's not that late. You're still walking straight, and she's not quite forgotten. I can hear the wine talking. Thank you. Yeah, urinary bladder. All right, let's do a tune. I just thought it was so funny. That was one of the first dirty word terms he thought of. Urinary bladder. He's the best. That anecdote doesn't really illustrate it, but he is the best. We're gonna do let's do the Lonely Guy tune right now from the Thumb Drive guys. This is one I made up. I don't know if this is interesting or not, but I made this up in a hotel room over in Evanston on, what do you call it? What is that place called? The Moon. What's that Moon thing called, that restaurant?
Prairie Moon?
Prairie Moon, yeah, right over there at that Holiday Inn, just looking down at the street at dusk and watching the single guys kind of walking around with their briefcases and stuff. Of the hopeless dreams I gather, I can sleep through all but one. And that's when I replay that moment when I moved my foolish tongue. If I had the kindness of the average liar, I could wake up beside the one friend I desire. We are assigned by God to suffer. We are forbidden to despair. And the well-trod path into shadow is a choice that I can't bear. So I will make up my bed as though someone may see, and pray the sun may burn us all away. And I'll take on each day I'm given, just like all the other lonely men. And I shall sing when the wanting is over, if it ever does end. To healing, the promised roads from dark till dawn, all of the endless shades of feeling in an old Ralph Stanley song. So hit me once more with them East Virginia blues, and wait for what you left to fall away. And I'll take on each day I'm given, just like all the other lonely men. And I shall sing when the wanting is over, if it ever does end. I will take on each day I'm given, just like all the other lonely men. And I shall sing when the wanting is over, if it ever does end.
Goodbye, good luck. See you soon.
Well, it's hard to tell what's on an angel's mind, but a suitcase means the same thing every time. One minute she loved me, the next she was gone. So goodbye, good looking, so long. She had 40 carat eyes and a figure fit to kill. She had legs that would not quit their walking still. Too good to let go of, too hard to hold on. So baby, goodbye, good looking, so long. And I may be blue forever after, but life can't always be diamonds and dreams, love and laughter. And when I think of her, I know I'll smile. Yeah, the earth sure felt like heaven for a while. But one blink of those blue eyes, and my heaven was gone. So goodbye, good looking, so long. Mr. Cobb on the salad. must be diamonds and dreams, love and laughter, and when I think of her, I know I'll smile. Yeah, the earth sure felt like heaven for a while. One blink of those blue eyes, and my heaven was gone. So goodbye, good looking, so long. Goodbye, good looking, so long. Thank you. I said a front door valley for wealth I had to have it. I wed a well-grown woman as skinny as a rabbit. Now I'm here at this payphone begging Katie, listen, I'll trade you $500,000 for your sweet poor valley kissing. Hey now, Katie K, heaven never made one cuter. Hey, I'd probably have to shoot her. Now, some give all their favors to a girl who's looking fine, but a girl that's sad and weeping will always win mine. When I see a pretty girl weeping, I run to her and fix it. When I see a pretty girl smiling, I run for the nearest exit. Hey now, Katie K, have never made one cuter. If I didn't love Katie K, I'd probably have to shoot her. Bear in mind, it's the love and ask thyself part I can't get behind. Each greeting he cold shoulders, he smiled at with a sneer. His wife can love him all she likes, I'll just gaze at the mirror. Hey now, Katie K, haven't ever made one cuter. If I didn't love Katie K, I'd probably have to shoot her. Is a Mormon, his values are askew. He's got more women than he can count, all I need is two. A bag of bones and a diamond ring, siphon off my pay, and a sweet thing down on the edge of town to love my nights away. Hey now, Katie K, haven't ever made one cuter. If I didn't love Katie K, I'd probably have to shoot her. I said, hey now, Katie K, haven't never made one cuter. If I didn't love Katie K, I'd probably have to shoot her. Thanks very much. Well, well, well. We have come to the end of our musical presentation, and soon we'll begin the merchandising portion of the evening. I'll be working that front table, and even if you didn't like the show and don't want to buy anything, come say hello and tell me what was wrong with it, and that'd be great. I would love to hear what's wrong with it. I always love to hear constructive criticism. I'd like to thank, if it sounded good to you in the house, I'd like to thank our man Eli on the soundboard over there. Eli, everybody thought it was good except one gentleman sitting over there. So that's great, thank you. And Ava back here from the Park West doing the monitors, thank you from the stage to Ava. She's been watching the show and smiling, which has made me feel real good to look over and see the monitor person smile. That's a great feeling. That makes me feel like I'm doing well, regardless of what you guys are doing out there. That's a good sign, right? And I've been seeing her on my the 5 shows that I've done in Park West over the last 20 years. I believe I've seen her every single time. So good to catch up with these people here. Good to catch up. Michael at the Michael, who's the grand poobah of the Chicago Humanities Festival, will be. This is weird to me. He's going to be helping me sell my crap over at the table. It's going to be me and him as salesmen. So I've really dragged Michael down into the gutter. And that's, I think that's fair recompense for what happened last time at the Chicago Humanities Festival, which unfortunately we've run out of time, and I can't tell that story, but I'll tell it at Space tomorrow night. We'll see how that goes. The story briefly was that, well, no, I'll tell you some other time. Anybody that buys 3 things at the table, I'll tell the story. It'll hold up the line for like 8 minutes, but... There was something else I wanted to say. Now I forgot what it was. Must not have been very important. Let's see. Oh, I want to point out, is Beth in the house, Eli? Does she make it over here? Oh, right over here? Right over here. There you are. And who else is here? Is Joe in the house? Dempsey? Oh, my God, right by Beth. You guys know each other? Oh, yeah. Saying hello to each other. My old friend Joe, he's a wonderful actor here in town and a funny guy. I got to tell you, we got into town last night, like I said. We got in about 7 and went out to dinner around 9:30, and I met my friend Joe. But for some reason, I decided, like, how frickin' tourist of me is this? I said, let's go to Gibson's Steakhouse. Big mistake. It's not that good over there. They gave us a plank of salmon and an iceberg lettuce salad and a cup of chicken noodle soup and charged us $130. I'm like, man, I should have gone to the Diner Grill on Irving Park Road. Yeah, we got some populists in the house tonight. That's great. I'm not going to Gibson's no more. That was ridiculous. Wasn't it, Joe? That was ridiculous. That was ridiculous. I mean, I enjoyed being with you. I didn't enjoy the rest of it, though. Well, on that note, let's do one more song. We're gonna not do an encore, just so you know. I don't know if you were gonna give us one, but we're not gonna do it. We're gonna bring up the lights and head out. We've all had a long night here. You guys have listened to the scholarly discussion, and you've been very kind to hear us play too. How about for one more time for Scott Siementaki, Larry Kohut, and Shad Cobb. Ryegrass in the winter time, flowers in the spring, but Texas in the summer is nigh on suffering. I went up on Jackson Hill at a diner, I sat down and I waved at every stranger just to move the air around. It's a long to ride for the little I gain. Brooklyn girl, I never thought it through. She had silk brocade in her bedroom and a job that paid for 2. I think I'll get down the old guitar and see what I may find. Get $1 off some lawyer on the number 7 line. It's a long to ride for the little I gain. But a 6-string on your shoulder might be the devil's brand. They'll put themselves above you, but for all their strut and brag, I'd trade every brick on Wall Street for one Black Mountain rag. It's a long to ride for the little I gain. like to know. Yeah, but the road it goes just one way, and the only goal in sight is to make a bit more in the daytime than I drink down at night. It's a long drive for the little I gain. Are fair and they all sing right on key, but I went down and I never found one sang as good as me. And they say that there's a wondrous land for any good man that dies, and if it's got drinking women, I'm gonna be surprised. It's a long ride for the little I
Robbie Fulks.